She carefully removed the ring from her finger, the motion akin to shedding a layer of her own skin, and placed it on the polished glass counter. Her hand shook. A faint imprint remained on her ring finger, a spectral reminder of the 7 years the band had rested there, a symbol of a promise now dissolved. The gentleman behind the counter offered her $12. $12 for 7 years of love, of optimism, of everything she had once held dear. She accepted the meager sum and departed, her thoughts consumed by her 2 children, their stomachs empty, awaiting her return with sustenance. Unbeknownst to her, the man who had just acquired her ring for a paltry $12 would re-enter her life 3 months hence, fundamentally altering its course. What becomes of us when the final asset we possess to trade is the very memory of the affection that shattered us? Stay with me, for this narrative will reaffirm why surrender is never the ultimate solution. This is the chronicle of Denise, a solitary mother, and a wedding ring valued at $12. At times, the very items we relinquish in moments of sheer desperation blossom into the genesis of unforeseen wonders. It was a frigid Thursday evening in Memphis, Tennessee, the kind of night when the wind felt like a blade, piercing through structures as if they were fashioned from mere paper. The mercury had plunged below the freezing point, and the aged apartment building, situated at the intersection of 3rd Street, seemed to sigh under the oppressive chill, its plumbing groaning, its window panes rattling precariously in their frames. On the 3rd floor, within apartment 3B, a young woman named Denise sat on her kitchen floor, her back pressed against the cabinetry. She was 28 years old. Her hair was haphazardly gathered into a loose bun. She was clad in an oversized sweatshirt that had once belonged to someone else, and a pair of sweatpants bearing a noticeable tear near the knee. Her bare feet rested on the frigid linoleum, and she could discern every minute imperfection in the flooring beneath her. The heating system had ceased functioning 3 days prior. She had contacted the landlord on 2 occasions. He had never responded. Consequently, Denise resorted to her familiar coping mechanisms. She piled blankets upon her children, stuffed old towels into the gaps beneath the doors, and kept the oven on its lowest setting for a few hours each evening, merely to abate the biting cold. She recognized the inherent risk, yet she persisted, for the frigid air was a far greater adversary. Down the hallway, her 2 children slumbered, Jalen, age 6, and Amara, 3. They shared a compact room containing a single mattress on the floor and a collection of blankets that Denise had painstakingly gathered from various thrift stores over the years. Jalen invariably slept closest to the door, asserting it was his duty as the man of the house to protect them. At the tender age of 6, he already bore the weight of family responsibility. Before succumbing to sleep, Jalen had gazed up at his mother with his large, earnest eyes and posed a question that struck Denise with the force of a physical blow. "Mama, will we have anything to eat tomorrow?" Denise managed a smile. She was a woman of perpetual smiles, even when pain was her sole companion, even when her smile was a deliberate fabrication. "Yes, my darling. Mama will find a way." Jalen nodded, reassured. He placed his trust in her, as he always had. This unwavering trust served as both her driving force and the source of her deepest heartache, for she harbored profound doubts about her ability to uphold that sacred promise. Once the children were asleep, Denise retreated to the kitchen and opened the refrigerator. The interior light flickered with a soft hum. The shelves were nearly barren. A carton of milk held perhaps 2 servings, a half loaf of bread had hardened considerably, and a solitary stick of butter remained. This constituted her entire provisions. She closed the door deliberately, leaned against the counter, and exhaled a breath that seemed to emanate from the very depths of her weary soul. Then her gaze fell upon her left hand. The ring was still present. It had been there for 7 years. A piece of silver plate, not genuine gold, with a slender band that had darkened slightly at the edges from years of constant wear. She knew its intrinsic value was negligible. Any jeweler would glance at it and dismiss it with a shake of their head. However, to Denise, that ring represented everything. It was the final vestige of a life she once knew. The last, tangible proof that someone had once pledged their devotion to her, uttering the words, "I choose you." She slowly rotated the ring on her finger, feeling the familiar indentation it had imprinted upon her skin over the passage of time. Her thoughts drifted to the day she received it. She recalled the radiant smile on his face as he placed it upon her finger. She remembered the boundless happiness she felt, the overwhelming sense of hope. And then her thoughts turned to her children, sleeping soundly in a cold room with empty bellies, their faith placed entirely in her ability to provide. Denise closed her eyes. Her jaw clenched. She pulled the ring from her finger and cradled it in her palm. It was so small, so incredibly light, almost weightless, yet it felt as though she held her entire past within her hand. "Tomorrow morning," she vowed in a whisper, audible only to herself, "at the earliest opportunity." She placed the ring on the kitchen counter, adjacent to an empty fruit bowl, and gazed at it for an extended period. The kitchen was enveloped in silence. The sole auditory disruptions were the gentle ticking of the wall clock and the faint breaths of her children emanating from the adjacent room. Little did she know, this ring, possessing scant worth in the eyes of the world, was poised to initiate something extraordinary. The subsequent morning, Denise awoke before the sun's ascent. Sleep had eluded her. Her mind had been a relentless carousel of thought throughout the night, turning the same idea over and over as if it were a stone in her hand. She dressed swiftly, donned her worn winter coat, the one with the recalcitrant zipper that she secured with a safety pin, and gently roused her children. "Come along, my darlings, we're going out." Jalen rubbed his eyes. "Where are we going, Mama?" "Just a brief errand. Then we're having breakfast." The mere mention of the word breakfast was sufficient to galvanize them into action. They traversed 4 city blocks to reach the pawn shop situated on Lamar Avenue. It was a modest, narrow establishment, wedged precariously between a check-cashing service and a laundromat. The windows were thick with a layer of dust, and behind the glass, discarded guitars, power tools, timepieces, and assorted jewelry lay under the pallid glow of yellow lights, resembling forgotten relics awaiting rediscovery. The interior air was permeated with the scent of metal, cleaning solvents, and something ancient that had remained undisturbed for far too long. A man stood behind the counter. He was in his 60s, with sparse white hair and spectacles perched low on his nose. He offered no greeting upon Denise's entrance. He simply observed her, then her 2 small children clinging to her coat, and waited. Denise approached the counter, her heart pounding in her chest. She reached into her pocket, retrieved the ring, and set it down gingerly on the glass surface. Her fingers lingered on it for a fraction of a second longer than necessary. The man retrieved it without uttering a word. He held it up to the light, turned it over, examined it through a small magnifying lens, and then placed it back on the counter. "Silver-plated," he stated plainly. "I can offer you $12. $12. 7 years of devotion, 7 years of aspirations, exchanged for $12. Denise yearned to refuse, to reclaim the ring, to slip it back into her pocket and walk away. But then she felt a small hand tugging at her coat. She glanced down. Amara was looking up at her, her wide, silent eyes conveying an unspoken plea. She wasn't demanding anything. She was simply holding on, and that was profound enough. Denise turned back to the man behind the counter. "All right," she conceded. The man opened the cash register and meticulously counted out 12 $1 bills, placing them one by one onto the glass counter. Denise gathered them, folded them with care, and tucked them into her pocket. She dared not look at the ring again. She could not. Taking Amara's hand and placing her other hand on Jalen's shoulder, she exited the establishment. The bell above the door emitted a soft chime as they departed. Outside, the frigid air stung her face, and it was then that tears began to fall. She turned her back to her children and quickly wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her coat. "Mama, why are you crying?" Jalen inquired. "I'm not crying, sweetie," Denise replied, her voice quivering slightly. "It's just the cold." They proceeded along the sidewalk towards the grocery store, and Denise did not look back. However, within the confines of the pawn shop, an observer had taken notice. A man stood in the furthest corner of the store, near a display of vintage radios and dusty record players. He had been present since Denise's arrival. He had witnessed her place the ring on the counter. He had observed the expression on her face when the proprietor declared the price. He had seen the way her fingers clung to it for a fleeting moment, as if bidding farewell to something cherished. And now he watched her depart with her 2 children. He remained there for a brief instant. Then he approached the counter. "I'll take that ring," he announced. The man behind the counter regarded him. $12. The man reached into his pocket, produced a creased bill, and placed it on the counter. He picked up the ring and held it between his thumb and forefinger. He turned it slowly. Inside the band, a small inscription was discernible. The letters were faint, nearly obliterated by time, yet he could still decipher them. Forever D and T. He closed his fingers around the ring and secreted it into his jacket pocket. He was unsure of his motivation for its purchase. He only knew that witnessing the woman remove it from her finger had evoked a peculiar ache within him, an emotion he hadn't experienced in years. He stepped outside into the crisp morning air and paused on the sidewalk, his gaze fixed down the street in the direction Denise had taken. She was already out of sight. He proceeded to the parking lot behind the store, entered an aging Ford pickup truck with visible rust along its wheel wells, and settled into the driver's seat without initiating the engine. He withdrew the ring from his pocket and examined it once more. The silver gleamed in the light, and the inscription seemed to momentarily radiate. He then returned it to his pocket, started the truck, and drove away. He would retain possession of that ring in his jacket pocket for precisely 91 days before he finally mustered the courage to act upon the insistent urging of his heart, a feeling that had taken root the very moment he first saw her. Now, to fully grasp Denise's story, we must journey back before the pawn shop, before the barren refrigerator and the defunct heating system, back to the very beginning. Denise spent her formative years in South Memphis, in a neighborhood characterized by houses that tilted precariously and sidewalks fractured like desiccated riverbeds. Her mother, Gloria, worked the night shift as a nurse at a hospital across town. She departed for her duties each evening at 6 o'clock and returned each morning at 7, utterly exhausted, but always greeting her daughter with a smile. Denise's father had departed when she was 4 years old. He simply vanished one morning, never to return. No correspondence, no phone calls, no explanation whatsoever. Gloria never spoke of him. She simply continued her relentless work. She remained a steadfast presence, raising Denise with all the love and strength she possessed entirely on her own. Denise was a quiet child, academically successful, preferring her own company. Her afternoons were often spent immersed in library books on the front porch, oblivious to the bustling activity of her neighborhood. She lacked numerous friends, nor did she feel the need for them. Her mother was her world, and that was sufficient. Then, during her junior year of high school, she encountered Terence. Terence was the sort of young man who commanded immediate attention upon entering a room. He was tall, possessed a captivating sense of humor, and exuded boundless energy. He spoke rapidly, laughed heartily, and had a peculiar way of looking at Denise that made her feel as though she were the sole occupant of his universe. He asked her out on a Tuesday. She accepted his proposal on a Wednesday. From that moment forward, they were inseparable. They exchanged vows when Denise was 21. It was a modest ceremony held at the courthouse, attended only by the two of them and Gloria. Terence was unable to afford a genuine ring. He purchased a silver-plated one from a second-hand store for $15. It featured a thin band that was slightly too large for Denise's finger. "It's not much," Terence admitted as he slid it onto her finger. "But I promise, one day I'll buy you a real one." Denise gazed at the ring, then at him, and a smile graced her lips. "This is real," she declared, and she genuinely meant it. In that very instant, standing in the sterile hallway of the courthouse beneath the incessant hum of fluorescent lights, she felt like the wealthiest woman on earth. The initial year was harmonious, not perfect, but undeniably good. They secured a small apartment. Terence found employment at a warehouse. Denise worked part-time at a grocery store. Then, Jalen was born, and for a period, it seemed as though their lives were falling perfectly into place. However, circumstances began to shift. The warehouse reduced Terrence's working hours. Subsequently, they terminated his employment altogether. He commenced drinking, initially in moderation, a single beer after dinner. Then two. Then an entire six-pack. Soon, he began returning home late. He ceased engaging with Jalen. He no longer looked at Denise with the same affection. Denise made concerted efforts. She attempted to communicate with him. She endeavored to be patient. She resorted to prayer, but Terrence was gradually receding from her grasp, and no matter how desperately she reached, she could not hold on to him. When Denise discovered she was pregnant with Amara, she harbored a flicker of hope that this news might draw him back. Perhaps a new life would serve as a poignant reminder of their shared past, of the future they were building together. But one evening, when Denise was 7 months pregnant, Terrence failed to return home. She waited for him until 2 in the morning, then 3, then 4. He never appeared. His belongings were gone. His phone number was disconnected. He left behind a stack of unpaid bills, an empty bottle on the kitchen counter, and a silence so profound it permeated every corner of their apartment. He never contacted her. He never sent a letter. He simply vanished, much like a hand withdrawn from water, leaving behind only ephemeral ripples that quickly dissolved into nothingness. Denise brought Amara into the world alone. Gloria visited her at the hospital, offered her hand, and remained for 3 days. However, Gloria's age was advancing, and her own health was deteriorating. She could no longer bear the weight of supporting both of them. Thus, Denise carried herself. She accepted every available job, working as a cashier at Walmart, a housekeeper at a motel off the interstate, and a delivery driver whenever she could borrow a friend's car. She never complained. She never faltered. Yet the financial ledger never balanced. Rent, childcare, diapers, food, utilities. There was invariably more month than money. She never initiated divorce proceedings. She could not afford legal counsel. Therefore, technically, she remained married to a man who had disappeared without a trace. She continued to wear the ring he had given her, still bearing the weight of a broken promise. Then, Walmart reduced her hours. Subsequently, they terminated her employment entirely. They termed it corporate restructuring. Just like that, her income vanished. No savings remained, no family to rely upon, no contingency plan. The sole possession she had left that could be converted into cash was a $15 ring from a secondhand store, and now even that ring was gone. $12. That was the sum Denise had to work with. 12 individual dollar bills neatly folded in her coat pocket. She proceeded directly from the pawn shop to the Save-A-Lot located at the corner of Shelby Drive. Holding Amara on one hip and Jalen's hand in the other, she meticulously calculated her expenses as she entered the store. A gallon of milk, $3.29. A loaf of white bread, $1.89. A jar of peanut butter, the store's own brand, the large size, $2.49. A pack of instant noodles containing 6 pouches, $1.19. A small bag of rice, $2.10. She stood in the aisle counting on her fingers. This left her with approximately $1 remaining. She selected a single banana and placed it in Jalen's hand. "For you," she said. "Just one?" Jalen questioned. "One is enough for today." At the checkout, the total amounted to $11.18. Denise paid with her folded bills, placing the remaining change, 82 cents, into her pocket. She carried the grocery bags home with Amara on her hip and Jalen walking beside her, slowly peeling the banana as if it were a rare treasure. That evening, Denise prepared peanut butter sandwiches for their supper. She meticulously cut each sandwich into 4 triangles, recalling Jalen's assertion that triangles possessed a superior taste to squares. She poured milk into 2 small cups. She served the children their food and sat opposite them at the kitchen table, observing them as they ate. She did not prepare a plate for herself. "Mama, aren't you eating?" Jalen inquired. "I already ate, sweetie, while I was cooking." She had not, but the logic was straightforward. By foregoing meals, the food would last for 5 days instead of 3. 5 days represented a significant duration. 5 days offered ample time to secure employment. 5 days was sufficient for a change in circumstances. The following morning, Denise diluted the milk with a small amount of water to extend its quantity. She poured it into Jalen's cereal bowl, containing the rice puffs she had discovered at the rear of the cabinet, the last remnants from a box purchased weeks prior. Jalen took a sip and made a displeased face. "This milk tastes funny, Mama." Denise responded without missing a beat. "It's a new brand, darling. They were out of the usual kind." Jalen shrugged and continued eating. Denise turned away to conceal her expression. The days began to blur together. On Monday, she walked to a Burger King on Elvis Presley Boulevard and inquired about available positions. The manager directed her to complete an online application. Denise lacked access to a computer. She proceeded to the public library, waited 40 minutes for an available terminal, and submitted the form. She meticulously listed every job she had ever held. She indicated her immediate availability. She clicked Submit. She applied at a Dollar General, a gas station, and a car wash. She filled out countless forms, reiterating the same information repeatedly: name, address, work history, references. Her list of references was limited. She included Gloria's phone number, despite Gloria being hospitalized for 3 months and frequently unable to answer her phone. She waited. She checked her phone hourly, ensuring the ringer was activated, vigilant for any missed calls. No calls materialized. She applied again, this time at a different Dollar General, a different gas station, and a cleaning company seeking overnight workers. She left her contact information everywhere she could. She greeted every manager with a smile, shook every hand, and uttered, "Thank you for your time," with genuine sincerity. Still, no offers arrived. By Wednesday, the peanut butter supply was depleted by half. The bread was reduced to 4 slices. The rice reserves were dwindling. Denise recalculated her meager resources in her mind, a tightness constricting her chest. Every evening after her children had fallen asleep, Denise would sit by the kitchen window and gaze out at the street below. The solitary streetlight outside their building would flicker intermittently, casting elongated orange shadows across the pavement. She could discern music drifting from somewhere down the block, the intermittent barking of a dog, the sharp slam of a car door. Her gaze drifted to her left hand. The ring was gone, yet the imprint remained. A faint, pale line etched into her skin, a testament to the 7 years the band had resided there. She gently traced the groove with her thumb, as if deciphering a scar. "God," she whispered, her voice so low that even the walls could not possibly hear her. "I don't know how much longer I can endure this." She remained seated for an extended period. The streetlight continued its rhythmic flickering. The music gradually faded. The street descended into quietude. By Friday, all the food had been consumed. Every last morsel. The milk carton was empty. The bread bag contained nothing but a scattering of crumbs. The peanut butter jar had been scraped entirely clean with a spoon. Denise stood before the open refrigerator, her eyes fixed on the barren shelves. The light buzzed faintly. The frigid air drifted out, caressing her face. This marked the second occasion she had stood before this refrigerator, confronting its emptiness. However, the previous instance she possessed a ring to sell. This time, she had nothing. No ring, no savings, no impending paycheck, nothing but 82 cents residing in her coat pocket and 2 children who would awaken hungry in a few short hours. Denise closed the refrigerator door and pressed her forehead against its cool surface. The metal felt cold against her skin. She closed her eyes and stood there, breathing deliberately, clinging to the sole possession that remained: herself. The following Monday morning, Denise dressed in her cleanest attire, garments she had meticulously hand-washed in the bathtub 2 days prior and hung to dry on the shower rod. She pulled her hair back neatly, donned her only pair of shoes that lacked any holes, and walked to a diner named Patty's Place, located on Poplar Avenue. A sign in the window proclaimed, "Now hiring." She entered the establishment, requested to speak with the manager, and waited by the counter for 15 minutes. A woman in her 40s emerged from the back room. She carried a clipboard in one hand and a weary expression on her face. "You're here about the job?" "Yes, ma'am." The manager conducted a visual assessment of Denise. "Do you have experience?" "Yes, ma'am. I worked at Walmart for 2 years. Prior to that, I was a housekeeper at the Route 78 motel." The manager nodded thoughtfully. "We require assistance during the evenings and on weekends, specifically from 4 o'clock until closing. Is this something you can commit to?" Denise's spirits plummeted. 4 o'clock until closing meant she would need someone to look after Jalen and Amara every single evening, as the daycare facility shut its doors at 6 o'clock. With no family in the vicinity and no funds for a babysitter, she was in a predicament. "I'm actively pursuing childcare arrangements," Denise stated cautiously. "I just need a little time to finalize them." The manager's expression remained unyielding. "We need someone who can begin this week. A dependable schedule is essential. No uncertainties." Denise responded, "I completely understand, but if you could possibly grant me a few days to—" "We'll keep your information on file," the manager offered, a phrase Denise recognized as a polite dismissal. "We'll be in touch." They never called. 2 days later, Denise entered a small convenience store on Park Avenue. The man behind the counter reviewed her application with a frown. "It indicates here that you haven't been employed for 2 months." "I was laid off," Denise explained, "but I'm ready to work immediately." He countered, "We're seeking an applicant with a more consistent employment history. No gaps." Denise longed to explain that the hiatus wasn't her choice, that she had been actively contributing in every way possible since she was 16, and that the sole reason for her current situation was a corporate decision that viewed her as mere data. However, she remained silent, simply nodding and saying, "Thank you for your time." Next, she approached a delivery service. The woman on the phone inquired, "Do you possess a reliable vehicle?" "No, ma'am," Denise replied, "but I can—" "You require a car for this position." "I apologize," the woman interrupted, abruptly ending the call. Each time Denise returned to her apartment after another unsuccessful interview, she maintained the same facade, a bright smile and a steady voice. "Did you find employment, Mama?" Jalen would ask, his question echoing his hopeful anticipation for snow. "Almost," Denise would reply, a word she repeated so often that its original meaning began to fade. Almost. Almost. It was a term that suggested advancement, but ultimately conveyed stagnation. One afternoon, after her third rejection of the week, Denise found herself on a bench at a bus stop on Lamar Avenue. She was scheduled to take the bus to yet another interview, but her body felt leaden, her legs as heavy as concrete. She covered her face with her hands and remained hunched forward, breathing into her palms. Tears wouldn't come. She was too exhausted. A few minutes later, she felt someone sit beside her. Without looking up, she heard a gentle, elderly voice ask, "Are you all right, dear?" It was a voice as soft and warm as a sun-kissed blanket. Denise slowly lifted her head. A small, frail, elderly woman, her silver hair tucked beneath a knitted cap, sat beside her. She held a brown paper bag on her lap, and her kind, steady eyes regarded Denise without judgment. "Yes, ma'am," Denise replied, managing a faint smile. "Just feeling weary." The old woman observed her for a long, quiet moment before nodding. "Weariness is merely another word for strength, child. Never forget that." The bus arrived. The old woman stood, gently patted Denise's shoulder, and boarded the bus. The doors closed, and the bus departed, vanishing as quickly as she had appeared. Denise remained on the bench for another 10 minutes. She never learned the woman's name, and would likely never see her again, but those words, a simple sentence from a stranger, resonated deep within her chest like a tiny flame in a cold room. She stood, adjusted her coat, and continued on her way. 3 days later, on a Thursday morning, Denise was walking down Summer Avenue with Jalen and Amara. She had no specific destination. She had exhausted all potential job leads. She walked simply because the act of moving felt preferable to sitting in her empty apartment, staring at the walls. Then, her attention was caught by a small, handwritten sign taped to the window of a laundromat. The letters, in blue marker on white cardboard, read, Help wanted, part-time, flexible hours. Denise halted. She reread the sign. Part-time, flexible hours. She peered through the window. Inside, rows of washing machines and dryers hummed softly. An older woman stood behind a folding table, sorting clothes with practiced efficiency. Denise pushed the door open and stepped inside. The warm air, thick with the scent of detergent and fabric softener, enveloped her. It was a clean, comforting aroma. The woman behind the table looked up. She appeared to be in her mid-60s, with reading glasses suspended from a chain around her neck and her gray hair neatly secured in a bun. Her hands looked strong, and her face, though etched with life's experiences, held a kindness that had not been hardened by adversity. "May I assist you?" the woman asked. "I noticed your sign," Denise replied. "The help wanted notice." The woman placed down the shirt she was folding and looked at Denise, then at Jalen, who held his mother's hand, and finally at Amara, who rested her head on Denise's shoulder, half asleep. "I'm Lorraine," the woman introduced herself. "This establishment has been mine for 20 years. I'm Denise, and these are my children, Jalen and Amara." Lorraine nodded slowly. You have experience. I can clean. I can fold. I can interact with customers. I'll handle any duties required." "You have children?" Lorraine observed, not as a question, but as a statement, her gaze returning to them, noting Jalen's closeness to his mother and Amara's small hand gripping Denise's coat collar. Denise braced herself, anticipating the inevitable inquiry about childcare and availability, the question that invariably led to the same negative outcome. However, Lorraine did not ask it. Instead, she tilted her head slightly and inquired, "What hours would be most convenient for you?" Denise blinked in surprise. No one had ever posed that question before. Every job she had applied for dictated their hours. No one had ever asked about hers. "Mornings," Denise replied. "While Jalen is at school, I can bring Amara with me if that's acceptable." Lorraine glanced at Amara, who had opened her eyes and was watching the spinning dryers with wide-eyed curiosity. "She's very quiet," Denise assured her. "Then she is most welcome," Lorraine agreed. Lorraine offered Denise $9 per hour for 25 hours per week. It was part-time, barely above minimum wage, and wouldn't make Denise wealthy or even financially comfortable, but it was a start. It was employment and income. "I'm aware it's not a substantial amount," Lorraine commented, as if sensing Denise's thoughts. "This isn't a prestigious role, but it is honest work. And honest work has a peculiar way of revealing opportunities you might not have otherwise discovered." Denise commenced her employment the following morning, arriving before the laundromat opened. She swept the floors, cleaned the machines, and folded any clothes left behind by customers overnight. Jalen occupied a corner near the window with his backpack, diligently completing his homework on a small plastic chair. Amara nestled on a blanket Lorraine had provided, surrounded by a pile of clean socks she was attempting to pair. It was far from perfect or glamorous, but for the first time in weeks, Denise experienced a feeling she had nearly forgotten: usefulness. Now, before we continue Denise's narrative, it's crucial to grasp a vital point. What Denise endured isn't merely a story. It's a stark reality for millions of women across this nation daily. In the United States, nearly 30% of single-mother households subsist below the poverty line, equating to almost 1 in every 3. For a single mother, poverty transcends a mere lack of funds. It necessitates agonizing choices between rent and sustenance, compels her to forego her own meals to ensure her children are fed, and renders a help-wanted sign an agonizing reminder that even securing employment doesn't guarantee the availability of affordable childcare. The average annual cost of childcare in America exceeds $10,000. For a single mother earning minimum wage, this expense consumes nearly half of her total pre-tax income. Consider that. Half of her earnings dedicated solely to childcare, enabling her to work and earn that very money. It's a cycle with no easy escape. Furthermore, there's a crucial aspect that often goes unacknowledged. Employers perceive a resume gap as a risk, overlooking the woman who spent those months tending to infants, preparing meals, reading bedtime stories, and maintaining a household through sheer willpower and love. They see an empty space, and that void costs women their livelihoods every single day. Approximately 14 million children in the United States reside in households experiencing food insecurity. This means that at this very moment, as you're observing this, children are going to bed hungry, not in some distant land, but right here, in Memphis, in Detroit, in Houston, in your city, perhaps even on your street. While Denise's story is fictional, the struggles she embodies are profoundly real. The statistics are accurate, the hunger is palpable, and the obstacles are undeniable. The women standing before empty refrigerators at midnight, desperately strategizing how to feed their families the next day, are undeniably real. This is why this story holds significance, not for its dramatic flair or entertainment value, but because somewhere, right now, a woman akin to Denise is holding her children close, wondering if anyone truly sees her. Let us now return to the narrative. While Denise was diligently folding laundry and rebuilding her life step by painstaking step, someone else in Memphis had been carrying a burden for weeks, something small, something silver, something that weighed almost nothing in his pocket but bore immense weight on his heart. Marcus. Do you recall him? The gentleman from the pawn shop, the one who purchased Denise's ring for $12 and departed without a word. We must revisit him now, for to comprehend what unfolds next, you need to understand who Marcus is and why that ring held such significance for him. Marcus was 33 years old. He worked as an electrician for a modest firm named Delta Electrical Services, situated on the eastern edge of Memphis. He wasn't in a leadership position. He was simply a craftsman who reported for duty each morning at 7 o'clock, donned his tool belt, and dedicated his days to running wires through walls and repairing circuits in older structures. His hands were rough and calloused, a testament to the nature of his livelihood. He rented a one-bedroom apartment off Getwell Road and drove a pickup truck with over 160,000 miles on it. He mostly ate his meals alone. He was unmarried, childless, and largely solitary. His social circle consisted of a few colleagues, a cousin in Atlanta whom he contacted on holidays, and a neighbor who occasionally offered a wave from across the parking lot. Marcus led a quiet existence, not by design, but because quiet was the only state he had ever known. He had been raised in foster care, entering the system at the age of 9. Prior to that, he resided with his mother, a woman named Charlene, in a small apartment on the city's south side. Charlene juggled 2 jobs. She cleaned offices in the morning and waitressed at a diner in the evenings. She was perpetually weary, constantly in motion, and always rushing from one commitment to the next, yet her love for Marcus was boundless. Charlene was a single parent. Marcus never knew his father and never inquired about him, nor did Charlene ever broach the subject. It was solely the two of them, and for a period that was sufficient. However, Charlene was ailing. Her illness had persisted for an extended duration. She suffered from intractable headaches and experienced an unaffordable weight loss. At night she would cough, deep, rattling sounds that seemed to reverberate through the walls. Marcus would lie in bed, pulling his blanket up to his chin, counting the agonizing seconds between each cough, desperately hoping the next one wouldn't materialize. Lacking health insurance and unable to afford medical consultations, she simply continued to work to persevere until one day she could no longer do so. Marcus was 9 years old when his mother was admitted to the hospital. He remembers sitting in the waiting area, his legs dangling, unable to reach the floor. A nurse emerged and informed him that he could see her. He walked into the room and observed his mother lying in a bed that appeared too large for her frail frame. She was gaunt, her complexion ashen, her eyes half closed. Yet upon seeing him, she managed to smile. "Come here, my darling," she murmured. Marcus clambered onto the bed and sat beside her. She reached beneath her pillow and withdrew something small and silver. A ring, her wedding band, the sole piece of jewelry she possessed. "Keep this," she instructed, pressing it into his palm. Her hand felt cold, her fingers thin and trembling. "It's the only thing I have that truly matters." Marcus held the ring, examining it. It was simple, small, and silver, much like Denise's ring, much like the one he would acquire from a pawn shop 24 years later. "Mama, you're going to be all right, aren't you?" Marcus asked. Charlene smiled once more, but this time the smile did not reach her eyes. "I love you, my child, more than anything in this world. Never forget that." She passed away 3 days later. Marcus entered the foster care system, moving from one household to another, from one family to the next. Some were kind, others less so, but throughout it all, through every new school, every unfamiliar bedroom, and every new set of regulations, Marcus held onto that ring. He kept it in his pocket during the day and placed it beneath his pillow at night. It was the sole, tangible remnant of her. He preserved it for 24 years, through high school, trade school, his initial employment, his first apartment, and his first heartbreak. That ring accompanied him everywhere. It served as his anchor, his affirmation that he had once been loved, that he had mattered to someone. Then, 6 months prior to his visit to the pawn shop on Lamar Avenue, his truck was broken into while parked at a job site. His tools and radio were stolen, along with a small leather pouch from the glove compartment, the pouch containing his mother's ring. Marcus filed a police report and frequented every pawn shop in Memphis, describing the ring in the hope that someone might have turned it in. His efforts were in vain. No one had. The ring was gone, vanished as abruptly as it had appeared. 24 years of safekeeping, gone in a single afternoon. He ceased his search after a month, rationalizing that it was merely a ring, a piece of metal, and that the memory of his mother resided within him, not in an object. However, late at night, in the silent darkness of his apartment, he would instinctively reach for his pocket, feel the void, and a piece of him would shatter anew. This profound sense of loss was the catalyst for his presence in the pawn shop that morning. He wasn't there to purchase anything. He visited the establishment as one might visit a memorial site, not to reclaim what was lost, but to be in proximity to the places where lost things often end up. And then he saw Denise. He watched her approach the counter with her 2 young children. He saw her remove a ring from her finger, observed the tremor in her hand, and witnessed the pawnshop attendant utter $12 without a flicker of emotion. He saw Denise swallow hard, glance down at the little girl clinging to her leg, and assent with an "okay." In that instant, Marcus didn't perceive a stranger. He saw his mother. The same trembling hands, the same quiet fortitude, the same refusal to weep in front of her children, the same agonizing dilemma between cherishing something precious and ensuring her family's survival. He purchased the ring before he even fully comprehended his actions. $12. He slipped it into his jacket pocket and walked outside. Denise had already departed. He scanned the street in both directions, but she had melted into the cold morning air with her children, and he had no knowledge of her identity or her whereabouts. In the ensuing weeks, Marcus returned to the pawn shop on 2 separate occasions. He inquired of the owner if the woman had returned. The owner merely shrugged, stating he didn't keep records of his patrons. Marcus drove through the surrounding neighborhoods, uncertain of what he was searching for: a woman, a worn coat, accompanied by 2 small children. That was his only clue. He did not find her. However, he kept the ring. He carried it in his pocket every single day, in the exact location where his mother's ring had once rested. Each night, he would take it out, read the inscription on the inner band, "Forever, D and T," and ponder the woman who had worn it. He wondered if she was well, if her children had been fed, if she was out there somewhere, missing this ring as he missed his. He did not know her name, nor did he know her story. But he knew one thing with certainty: he was going to find her, and he was going to return it to her. 6 weeks. That's how long the period of stability lasted. 6 weeks of waking early, walking to the laundromat, folding clothes, tidying machines, earning $9 an hour, and harboring the faint hope that perhaps, just perhaps, things were beginning to improve. Denise managed to pay a portion of her overdue rent, not the full amount, but enough to deter her landlord from further action. She meticulously planned her grocery shopping, stretching every dollar as if weaving fabric on a loom, focusing on essentials like rice, beans, eggs, and bread, nothing extravagant. Crucially, the refrigerator was no longer bare, and that accomplishment alone felt like a significant victory. Jalen began to smile more frequently. He enjoyed the laundromat, finding contentment in sitting in the corner, completing his homework amidst the rhythmic hum of the machines. He also liked Lorraine, who consistently saved him a peppermint from the jar she kept behind the counter. Amara had her own designated spot on a blanket near the dryers, where she would often fall asleep, warm and secure, lulled by the sounds of the spinning clothes. For 6 weeks, Denise experienced a sensation she hadn't felt in a considerable time: solid ground beneath her feet. Then, on a Tuesday evening, Jalen began to cough. Initially, Denise attributed it to a simple cold, offering him warm water with honey and tucking him in with an extra blanket. However, by Wednesday morning, the cough had worsened, developing a deep, wet quality that seemed to originate from his chest and refused to relent. Jalen's forehead felt hot to the touch, his eyes appeared glazed, and he lacked any appetite. By Wednesday night, his fever had climbed to 103 degrees Fahrenheit. Lacking a car and the funds for a taxi, Denise wrapped Jalen in a blanket, placed Amara on her hip, and walked 6 blocks to the bus stop in the biting cold. They took the bus to Regional 1 Medical Center. The emergency room was brightly lit, noisy, and crowded with individuals seated on plastic chairs, exhibiting symptoms of coughing, crying, applying ice packs, or staring blankly at their phones. Denise held Jalen on her lap as they waited for 2 hours. When a doctor finally attended to him, she listened to his chest with a stethoscope, ordered a chest x-ray, and returned with an expression that Denise instantly recognized: the somber look of someone delivering difficult news gently. "Your son has pneumonia," the doctor stated gravely. "We need to commence antibiotic treatment immediately. He will require monitoring for 3 to 5 days. Denise nodded, ready to agree to any course of action, even a journey to the moon, if it meant her son's recovery. Then a woman from the billing department approached. She was polite, wore a smile, and carried a clipboard. "Ma'am, do you have insurance?" she inquired. "No," Denise replied. The woman nodded and made a note. The estimated cost for the emergency room visit, the x-ray, antibiotics, and the monitoring period is approximately $2,800. The figure struck Denise with the force of a concrete block dropped from a rooftop. She did not possess $2,800. She didn't even have $280. Her checking account held $73, and there was a jar of coins on her kitchen counter. "We can arrange a payment plan," the woman offered, "but we will require a signature." Denise signed. What other recourse did she have? That night, Jalen rested in a hospital bed that seemed excessively large for him, connected to an intravenous drip and a steadily beeping monitor. His complexion was pale, his breathing shallow yet regular. The nurse assured Denise that the antibiotics were effective and that he simply needed time. Denise sat beside him in a plastic chair, the kind designed for easy cleaning rather than comfort. Her back ached, her eyes stung. She held Jalen's hand, his small, warm fingers clasped around hers, and listened to the rhythmic pulse of the heart monitor. Beep, beep, beep. She reflected on all she had accomplished, selling her ring, securing employment, and establishing a semblance of stability. She had arduously ascended from obscurity. She had meticulously followed every sensible path. And now, here she found herself, seated in a medical facility, clasping her ailing child's hand, utterly overwhelmed by a financial burden she deemed insurmountable. It felt akin to scaling an endless summit. Every instant she believed progress was made, the very foundation would crumble, sending her tumbling back down. She closed her eyes, her voice a mere whisper within the silent chamber. "Please, ensure he recovers. That is my sole plea. Just permit my son to be well." Her mobile device vibrated. She glanced at the display. It was Lorraine. "Hello, dear. I heard about Jalen. Do not concern yourself with the establishment, do you comprehend? Your son takes precedence. Your position awaits your return. Take all the time you deem necessary. Denise reread the communique multiple times. Then she pressed the phone against her heart and exhaled deeply. She was not entirely isolated, not completely, not any longer. 3 days later, Jalen's condition improved. A healthy hue had returned to his complexion. He was consuming sustenance once more, small portions of hospital-issued jello and crackers that, in his opinion, tasted like paper. He was vocalizing his displeasure, which Denise interpreted as a positive indication. Children who are unwell do not voice complaints. Children who are on the mend do. The physician indicated he was fit for discharge but required completion of his antibiotic course. She presented Denise with a pharmaceutical authorization and a release document. Subsequently, the accounts department transmitted the final sum, amounting to $3,200. This figure exceeded the initial estimation. An additional diagnostic procedure had been conducted, necessitating an extra overnight stay. Denise surveyed the monetary value presented on the paper, and the ground seemed to shift beneath her. She affixed her signature to the payment arrangement, committing to $50 per month. This would necessitate more than 5 years to fully liquidate. 5 years of $50 installments, funds she did not possess, diverted from an income that scarcely covered basic necessities like rent and sustenance. They traveled home via public transit. Jalen rested his head against her shoulder, still quite feeble. Amara occupied the adjacent seat, subdued, cradling a plush Ursine toy bestowed by one of the attending nurses. Upon their arrival at the apartment complex and their ascent to the 3rd floor, Denise detected it instantly, a yellow notice affixed to their doorway. She did not require a close examination to ascertain its contents. She recognized its nature. She had observed such declarations on other residence doors in different buildings in past phases of her existence. However, this time, it was her portal that bore the decree, a notification of overdue rent. You are afforded 14 days to remit the entire outstanding balance or relinquish possession of the premises. Denise detached the notice from the door, folded it meticulously, and placed it within her pocket. She unlocked the entrance, carried Amara inside, guided Jalen to his sleeping area, and settled them both under their coverings. She ensured their comfort. She confirmed their security. She bestowed a kiss upon each of their brows and gently closed their sleeping quarters portal. Subsequently, she entered the kitchen, settled onto the floor in the darkness, and wept. This was not a subdued weeping, not the sort where one dries their eyes and perseveres. This was the other variety, the sort that originates from a depth so profound one was unaware of its existence, the sort that convulses one's entire being, making one's chest feel as though it were being rent asunder from within. She pressed a cushion against her face to shield the children from her distress. She bit her lip until the unmistakable taste of metal registered on her palate. And she wept. I relinquished my engagement ring. I secured employment. I adhered to every advisable course of action. Why does it remain insufficient? She swayed back and forth on the kitchen floor, her arms entwined around the cushion, her tears saturating the fabric. What course of action should I pursue? What course of action should I pursue? What course of action should I pursue? The query reverberated within her consciousness like a ceaseless peal. She possessed no resolution. She had nothing further to liquidate, no avenues to curtail expenditures, no individuals remaining to solicit assistance. Then she detected it. A delicate cough emanated from the sleeping quarters. And then a voice, frail and weary. Mama. Denise wiped her face with both hands. She inhaled, then exhaled again. She arose, proceeded to the sleeping quarters, and opened the door. Jalen was propped up in his bed, his eyelids partially closed, his hair disheveled against the pillow. "May I have some water?" he whispered. "Certainly, my dear." She went to the kitchen, filled a glass with water, and returned it to him. He drank deliberately, then lifted his gaze to her, his large, earnest eyes fixed upon her. "Mama?" "Yes, my dear. You are the most exceptional mother in the entire world." Denise felt an internal fissure within her chest. Not a rupture, but a crack. As if illumination were breaching a barrier, she offered a genuine smile, the first in days. "And you are the most exceptional child in the entire world," she stated. She reclined beside him on the modest mattress. He nestled against her side, his head resting upon her arm. Amara was already slumbering on the opposite side, her small hand tightly gripping the stuffed toy. Denise drew the covering over all three of them and closed her eyes. She lacked answers. She had no discernible strategy. However, she possessed this enclosure, these offspring, this warmth. She clung to it with the tenacity of someone grasping a rope in darkness, not because its terminus was visible, but because relinquishing it was not a viable option. She was unaware that in precisely 11 days, a stranger bearing a ring valued at $12 in his possession would enter the laundromat, initiating a cascade of transformations. It occurred on a Thursday afternoon, the quintessential, ordinary, unremarkable Thursday that fades from memory the instant it concludes. The sky was overcast. A light precipitation had fallen that morning, leaving the thoroughfares glistening and damp. The establishment on Summer Avenue emanated its customary rhythm, the whirring of washing machines, the tumbling of dryers, the aroma of warm detergent permeating the atmosphere. Denise was positioned behind the service counter, folding a collection of white linens. Amara reposed in slumber upon a blanket near the drying appliances. Lorraine had departed to procure necessary provisions from the neighboring hardware emporium. It was solely Denise and a handful of patrons occupying the plastic seating, observing their garments in rotation. The portal opened. A chime sounded. Denise's gaze ascended. A gentleman entered. He appeared to be in his early 30s, attired in work boots, trousers exhibiting subtle smudges on the knees, and a dark jacket with a frayed collar. His hands were calloused, indicative of daily manual labor. He paused just inside the entrance, surveying the laundromat as if seeking something specific. Subsequently, his eyes alighted upon Denise. He became motionless. Denise did not recognize him. She had never encountered his countenance previously. She had no basis for doing so. The last occasion they occupied the same space, she had been weeping at a pawnshop counter, and he had been observing from a secluded corner. "May I assist you, sir?" she inquired politely. The gentleman abstained from immediate response. He remained stationary, observing her, his jaw taut, his gaze traversing her features as if confirming a pre-existing certainty. Then he advanced slowly, step by measured step. He reached the counter and halted. He was sufficiently proximate for Denise to perceive the faint scar above his left eyebrow and the subtle tremor in his hands. Without uttering a word, he reached into the interior pocket of his jacket and withdrew an object, a diminutive object, a silver object. He placed it upon the counter with deliberate care, as one would set down a delicate item. Denise looked down. Her heart ceased its rhythm. It was a ring, a slender silver band, its edges exhibiting a faint darkening. She recognized that ring. She was acquainted with its weight. She knew the sensation it imparted on her digit. She was aware of every abrasion, every contour, every infinitesimally faded millimeter of it. She extended her hand and retrieved it with quivering fingers. She turned it slowly, examining the interior of the band. The inscription remained perceptible. Faint, nearly obliterated, but present nonetheless. Forever D and T. Her throat constricted, her vision blurred. She looked up at the gentleman, her voice emerging as a whisper. Where did you obtain this?" "I was present in the pawn shop that day," he articulated. His voice was hushed, yet unwavering. "I observed you remove it." Denise's breath hitched. "You purchased my ring." "Indeed. Why?" The gentleman remained silent for an interval. He regarded the ring in her grasp, then refocused on her countenance, and as he spoke, his voice was laden with emotion, as if the words had resided within him for an extended period, awaiting their release. "Because my mother was also a single parent, and the sole memento she bestowed upon me was her wedding band." "I comprehend the significance of bearing such an item," he paused, "and I understand the cost associated with relinquishing it." Denise could no longer contain herself. Tears cascaded rapidly and profusely, falling onto the counter, onto the ring, onto her hands. She wept not for the ring itself. She wept because, for the first time since Terence's departure, someone had truly perceived her, not merely glanced at her, not overlooked her, perceived her, genuinely, profoundly perceived her. The gentleman reached into his pocket and withdrew nothing further. He produced no checkbook. He offered no currency. He simply stood there, composed and tranquil, while she wept. "I seek nothing from you," he stated softly. "I merely wish to return this. It belongs with you." Denise pressed the ring against her chest and gazed at him through her tears. "What is your name?" she inquired. "Marcus," he replied. "Marcus," she echoed. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Thank you. I am at a loss for words. Thank you." Marcus inclined his head. He began to turn towards the exit. "Wait," Denise interjected. "Please, do not depart just yet. At the very least, allow me to comprehend why you retained it for so long. Why did you seek me out?" Marcus halted. He pivoted back. He regarded Denise for a considerable duration, as if deliberating the extent of his disclosure. Then he drew one of the plastic chairs from the folding table and occupied it. "I did not seek you out," he affirmed. "I came here to perform laundry. I reside approximately a mile from this location. I have traversed this route countless times, yet never patronized it." He surveyed the laundromat. "I nearly bypassed it today as well, but an impulse compelled me to stop." Denise settled into a seat opposite him, still clutching the ring. "I have carried that ring in my pocket daily for 3 months," Marcus disclosed. "I returned to the pawn shop on 2 occasions, inquiring about you. The proprietor did not know your appellation. I drove through the neighborhood, hoping to encounter you. I never did. And then today I entered here, and there you were." They remained in silence for a moment. The washing machines hummed. The dryers spun. Amara stirred on her blanket but did not awaken. Then Denise did something she had not done with anyone in a very extended period. She recounted her narrative. All of it. The marriage, Terence's desertion, the termination of her employment, the evening she sat on the kitchen floor and resolved to sell the ring, the $12, the provisions that sufficed for 5 days, the rejections of employment applications, Claus, the laundromat, Jalen's pneumonia, the medical bill, the rent notice affixed to the door. She divulged everything because something in the manner he sat there, quiet and unmoving, made her feel secure in doing so. Marcus listened. He did not interrupt. He did not shake his head or offer commiseration. He simply listened, his hands clasped upon the table, his gaze steady, his expression serene. When she concluded, a prolonged pause ensued. Then Marcus spoke. "I am not affluent, Denise. I am an electrician. I earn sufficient to maintain shelter and sustenance. That is approximately the extent of it." He paused. "However, I possess some knowledge, insights that might prove beneficial." Denise regarded him, uncomprehending. "The medical bill," Marcus stated. "Most medical facilities in Memphis offer a charitable care program. If your income falls below a certain threshold, they can reduce the bill by 70, sometimes 80%. You simply need to complete a form and present proof of income. Most individuals are unaware of this. I only know because a companion underwent a similar predicament last year." Denise blinked. "They can reduce it?" "Indeed. And there is something further. There exists an organization on Poplar Avenue designated as Memphis Family Assistance. They provide emergency rental assistance. If you are delinquent with rent and can provide a pay stub, they can cover up to 3 months. I am aware because they aided my neighbor last winter." Denise stared at him. No one had ever imparted this information to her. Not the hospital, not the landlord, no one. "And one more item," Marcus added. He leaned forward. "There is a program at Southwest Tennessee Community College. It is provided at no cost for qualifying women. They impart vocational skills, HVAC, electrical, plumbing, a 6-month certification, and upon completion, they assist in securing employment. The starting remuneration approximates $20.22 per hour. He articulated this with unpretentious clarity, as if conveying directions to a retail establishment. No theatrics, no grand gesture, merely information. Denise looked at him. "Why are you sharing this with me?" Marcus shrugged. "Because someone once conveyed to me that the most challenging aspect of being destitute is not the financial strain. It is the ignorance of the opportunities that lie beyond. One cannot access a gateway of which one is unaware." The primary portal of the laundromat swung open. Lorraine entered, bearing a satchel of cleaning accoutrements. She paused upon observing Denise seated at the table with an unfamiliar individual, tears still glistening on her cheeks, a silver ring clasped in her hand. Lorraine's gaze shifted between Marcus, then Denise, then back to Marcus. "Is everything satisfactory?" Lorraine inquired. Denise offered a smile, a genuine, unfeigned, radiant smile, the sort that illuminates the eyes. "Yes, Miss Lorraine," she declared. "I believe it is." Lorraine deposited the satchel, proceeded to the small refrigeration unit behind the counter, and retrieved 2 bottles of water. She presented them at the table, placing one before Denise and the other before Marcus. "Well then," Lorraine remarked, patting Denise gently on the shoulder, "I shall be in the rear if you require me." She departed without further utterance. However, as she rounded the corner, Denise observed something she would forever cherish. Lorraine was smiling, a subtle, serene, knowing smile. The kind of smile that suggests, "I have been anticipating this." Marcus and Denise remained at the laundromat for an additional hour. He assisted her in transcribing the names, addresses, and telephone numbers of every available resource he could recall. He advised her on the initial forms to complete. He specified the documentation to present. He did not offer to subsidize her rent. He did not propose to defray the hospital expenditure. He did not produce his wallet at any point. He bestowed upon her something more invaluable than pecuniary aid. He furnished her with a roadmap. And for the first time in a considerable prolonged interval, Denise regarded the path ahead and perceived not a dead end. She observed avenues of possibility. Now, before we proceed, allow me to pause briefly, because what Marcus accomplished in that laundromat was not miraculous. It was not a cinematic interlude, yet it possesses a designation within the realm of scientific inquiry. Psychologists term it elevation. It is that pervasive, comforting sensation that suffuses the chest when one witnesses an act of genuine altruism. Not benevolence for public consumption, not kindness for personal gain. Simply kindness, enacted by choice. Researchers have ascertained that when individuals experience elevation, a remarkable phenomenon occurs. They do not merely feel content. They become demonstrably more inclined to assist others. Kindness, it transpires, is infectious, not in a metaphorical sense, in a tangible, quantifiable, scientific manner. Consider the chain of events within this narrative. A woman named Charlene, in her final moments in a hospital bed, gifted her son a ring, stating, "Guard this. It is the sole possession of profound significance I have." That expression of maternal affection resided within Marcus for 24 years. It shaped the individual he became. And when he encountered a stranger in a pawn shop relinquishing a ring of identical nature for a comparable reason, something within him stirred. He did not deliberate. He simply acted. Subsequently, Marcus carried that ring for 91 days. He did not discard it. He did not liquidate it. He preserved it. He sought her out. And upon finding her, he did not endeavor to assume a heroic persona. He simply returned it. And then he sat and shared the one contribution that cost him nothing, yet held more value than monetary wealth. Information, direction, a guide to opportunities of which she was unaware. Charlene's affection engendered Marcus's empathy. Marcus's empathy became Denise's turning point. And Denise, well, her subsequent actions remain to be seen. Such is the operation of kindness. It does not remain static. It circulates. It traverses from individual to individual, hand to hand, heart to heart, occasionally spanning years, occasionally spanning generations. One may never witness the culmination of the chain one initiates, yet it perseveres. Marcus did not rescue Denise with financial aid. He rescued her by truly perceiving her, by acknowledging her presence, and by demonstrating that she was not invisible. And at times, that is all any of us truly require, not a financial contribution, not a grand gesture, merely someone who observes us and communicates, "I perceive you, and your existence holds significance." Now let us resume the chronicle, for 6 months have elapsed since that Thursday afternoon in the laundromat, and Denise's existence bears no resemblance to its former state. She continues her employment at the laundromat, yet circumstances have altered. Lorraine has elevated her to full-time status, 40 hours per week, accompanied by a modest remuneration increase. Furthermore, Lorraine has commenced instructing Denise in the operational facets of the establishment, encompassing bookkeeping, inventory management, and interactions with maintenance personnel when machinery malfunctions. Lorraine stated that her own vitality is diminishing and she requires a dependable successor to ensure continuity when she is unable to continue. "You possess considerable acumen, Denise," Lorraine remarked to her one afternoon. "More than you realize. I did not merely offer you a position, I provided you with a future. Now make something of it." And Denise did. She matriculated into the Workforce Development Program at Southwest Tennessee Community College, the very initiative Marcus had brought to her attention. 3 evenings each week she attended classes, diligently preparing for her HVAC certification, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. It lacked ostentation. It was not the trajectory she had envisioned for herself at 18 years of age. However, Marcus had imparted a piece of wisdom that resonated deeply. "Trades are lucrative," he had stated, "and there is a perpetual demand for skilled individuals. No one outsources the repair of a malfunctioning air conditioning unit." She applied herself with utmost diligence. She studied with the intensity of someone who recognizes this as their sole opportunity, devoid of a safety net or a second chance. She perused technical manuals at the kitchen table. After the children had retired for the night, she practiced schematic diagrams on scrap paper during her breaks at the laundromat. She posed questions in class, even when she felt inept, understanding that 5 minutes of perceived foolishness was preferable to a lifetime of being lost. The medical bill, that figure which had once seemed an insurmountable barrier, Denise submitted an application for the charitable care program that Marcus had recommended. She furnished her pay stubs, her tax documentation, and all requisite materials. 2 weeks later, she received correspondence. The bill had been reduced by 80%. $3,200 diminished to $640. She established a payment arrangement, $50 per month. It was not insignificant, but it was attainable. The rent, Memphis Family Assistance, encompassed 3 months' coverage, 3 months of respite, 3 months of abstaining from sleepless nights spent engaged in mental arithmetic, attempting to ascertain which obligation to defer. Denise utilized this interval to achieve equilibrium, to accumulate a modest reserve, to cease living on the precipice of disaster. Jalen had regained his health. He attended school daily, his backpack slung over his shoulder, his countenance serious. He formed a camaraderie with Deshawn, a peer residing 2 floors below. They journeyed to school together each morning, and Jalen invariably offered Denise a wave from the sidewalk before disappearing around the corner. Amara commenced preschool, a Head Start initiative conveniently located 10 minutes from their apartment at no cost. She returned home each day with pigmented digits and newly acquired vocabulary. "Mama, I depicted a butterfly today. Mama, I acquired knowledge about the letter J. J represents Jalen and Marcus." Marcus did not arrive like a rescuer. He did not profess affection or offer grand assurances. He simply remained a consistent presence. Every Thursday, he frequented the laundromat, occasionally to conduct his laundry, on other occasions simply to converse. He and Denise would convene at the folding table amidst the gentle hum of the machinery, consuming water from the cooler, discussing matters both trivial and profound. He repaired the dripping faucet in her kitchen one Saturday without prior arrangement. He constructed a modest shelving unit for Jalen's bedroom using discarded lumber from a construction site. He presented Amara with a coloring book he had discovered at a service station. These were minor gestures, understated actions, the sort that elude prominent notice but foster an underlying foundation of stability. Denise did not fall in love with Marcus in a singular moment. There was no dramatic revelation, no impassioned confession amidst a downpour. The progression was more gradual, more tender. It was his attentive presence when she spoke, genuinely engaged, not merely anticipating his turn to respond. It was the way he interacted with Jalen and Amara, not as though they belonged to someone else, but as individuals, albeit small, deserving of consideration. It was his consistent approach, never making her feel indebted to him in any way. This shift happened organically, much like the growth of grass. It's a process you don't observe in the moment. Then, unexpectedly, it's simply there. One evening, after the children had fallen asleep, Denise sat on her bed, her gaze fixed on the ring. She had begun wearing it again on her left hand, in the very same position it had occupied for 7 years. She rotated it slowly, feeling the familiar texture against her skin. She gently removed it and held it up to the light. The inscription remained visible. Forever, D and T. Reading those words, she braced herself for the familiar ache, but this time it didn't surface. A soft, subtle smile graced her lips, and she carefully placed the ring into a small wooden container on her bedside table. She closed the lid with a tender touch. It wasn't a farewell. It was an expression of gratitude. Gratitude for the past, for the sacrifices it had entailed, and for the new beginning it had facilitated. The ring was no longer a source of pain. It represented a milestone, tangible proof of her journey and progress. 2 years later, Denise walked across a modest stage within a rented conference hall at Southwest Tennessee Community College, accepting her HVAC certification. It was an unpretentious ceremony, devoid of formal robes, academic caps, or celebratory music. The setting consisted of rows of folding chairs, a table laden with certificates, and a small assembly of instructors offering applause as each student's name was announced. However, when Denise's name was called, her standing seemed to amplify the room's energy. Lorraine was present in the third row, her enthusiastic clapping equivalent to 10 people. Marcus stood near the back, his characteristic quiet smile in place. And Jalen, perched on his chair with his feet dangling, joyfully exclaimed, "That's my mama!" Denise clasped her certificate with both hands, pressing it to her chest. Though merely a piece of paper, it felt imbued with immense weight. It embodied every sleepless night, every instance of an empty pantry, every setback, and every tear shed in the solitary darkness of her kitchen floor. All those experiences were condensed into that single document proclaiming, "You persevered." She secured employment with Delta Electrical and Mechanical Services, the same firm where Marcus was employed. It was a compact operation, comprising 8 individuals working from a warehouse located on the eastern outskirts of Memphis. Denise commenced her role at an hourly wage of $22. While not a substantial sum, it represented more than double her earnings at the laundromat. This income was sufficient to cover rent punctually, purchase groceries without meticulous budgeting, and treat Jalen and Amara to ice cream on a Friday afternoon without prior financial scrutiny. She relocated to a 2-bedroom apartment situated on a tranquil street, conveniently close to Jalen's school. The dwelling was modest and unadorned, yet it possessed a distinct advantage over her previous residence: individual bedrooms for each child. On the night of their move, Jalen stood in the doorway of his new room, surveyed his surroundings, and declared, "This is truly mine." "Entirely yours, sweetie," Denise replied. He settled onto the bed, bouncing once. Then, with a radiant grin that illuminated his entire face, he looked up at her and exclaimed, "Mama, this is the happiest day of my life." Amara began kindergarten that autumn. She sported a backpack nearly as large as herself and insisted on selecting her own attire each morning. Denise captured a photograph of her on the inaugural day, standing on the front steps, her gap-toothed smile wide. Lorraine continued to manage the laundromat on Summer Avenue, and every Saturday morning, Denise would arrive with 2 coffees, spending an hour assisting with folding laundry, cleaning machines, and reconnecting with the woman who had extended a crucial opportunity when others had not. "You don't need to continue coming, you know," Lorraine commented one morning. "You have your own life now." "I am aware," Denise responded. "That is precisely why I come." Then, one Saturday, a young woman entered the laundromat. She appeared to be in her early 20s, with red-rimmed eyes, disheveled hair, and a baby perched on her hip. The infant was whimpering. The woman's appearance suggested she had not slept in days. She did not approach the washing machines, but instead lingered by the entrance, looking around as if lost, as though she had sought refuge not for laundry purposes, but for a warm, non-judgmental space. Lorraine noticed her first, then glanced at Denise. Denise observed the young woman and saw a reflection of herself 2 years prior, standing in a pawn shop, clutching a ring, attempting to hold everything together with nothing. Denise set down her coffee. She approached the young woman slowly, with the caution one might employ when dealing with someone potentially skittish. She sat on the bench beside her, remaining silent for a moment, close enough to offer support without intrusion. Then she spoke. "I may not comprehend your current struggles, but I understand the feeling of having nothing left." She paused. "Would you permit me to share a story?" The woman met her gaze, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. She nodded, and Denise began. And so, the cycle continued. This narrative imparts several profound lessons. Firstly, one should never form judgments about individuals based solely on their present circumstances. The person pawning a ring for $12 today might be the one profoundly impacting someone's life tomorrow. One cannot ascertain a person's future trajectory by merely observing their current position. Secondly, offering assistance does not necessitate significant wealth. Marcus was not affluent. He did not present a large financial contribution or purchase a dwelling for her. He perceived a woman in distress, invited his attention, his presence, and shared his knowledge. That was all, and it transformed everything. It is not required to be wealthy to make a difference. One simply needs to possess the willingness to truly see people, to acknowledge their presence. Thirdly, relinquishing something cherished does not equate to surrender. At times, the sacrifices made during our darkest hours become the genesis of unforeseen blessings. Denise sold her ring, and that ring, that $12 token, became the connection linking her to Marcus, to Lorraine, to a new career, and to an entirely new chapter in her life. She did not lose her ring. She planted its potential. Therefore, I pose a question to you. Have you ever had to relinquish something precious for the sake of a loved one? Have you ever received unexpected aid from a stranger? Have you ever been that stranger offering help? Please share your experiences in the comments section. I am eager to hear every single account. And if you know someone who would benefit from hearing this message today, a single mother facing solitary battles, a father experiencing hardship, anyone feeling overlooked, kindly share this video with them. You never know whose life a story can transform. Another compelling narrative is forthcoming very soon. Therefore, I encourage you to subscribe to this channel and activate your notification bell to ensure you do not miss it. Thank you sincerely for watching. May you consistently encounter compassion when you need it most, and may you always be the source of kindness that someone else is earnestly seeking. God bless you.